Well, more now on returnees to the Isle of Man who have also, been caught up in the whole system of what's going to happen. The Chief Minister's alluded to the fact that maybe not everyone now has to stay at the Comus, but that's not yet completely sorted. But I'm glad to be joined in his camper van in France, a very good friend of mine, Geoff Allen. Geoff, long time since the police force and all the things.
I know it is, Paul. A long time.
You're living the life of Riley, travelling in your camper van then, obviously.
Yeah, well, we haven't been able to come home up to now because if you weren't in the UK, you couldn't go on the list to apply to come back. But that was changed in the week, we understand. So we're now heading so that we can be more handy. We can't go to the UK because there's nowhere for us to park. But I'm lucky I've got a friend who's got a big farm in Ireland, and we're going to wait it out there. So that's why we're in the camper van in France.
You've sent an open letter to the Chief Minister's. The reason I'm talking to you today because you're trying to explain the rationale, or you want more information, really, don't you?
Yeah, the reason I wrote to the Chief Minister was that I'm not a medical man and I'm certainly not a politician, but I like to think I've got a reasonable bit of common sense. And it strikes me that this forced quarantine, which has been brought into force, is unfair. It's disproportionate, and it's discriminatory. Now, can I say now, I've got no problem with the politicians. They have to take difficult decisions, and it's the advice that they're given that I've got a problem with. And the main issue, Paul, I'll be honest with you, is that this forced quarantine was brought in on clinical advice to protect the Isle of Man from the spread of the virus. Now, on the face of it, that makes sense. But the problem is the 29 people who've been in the Comus Hotel, the idea that they've been there is to make sure that they don't show any symptoms. They've not been tested. They've not been checked. They've not been examined. They've not been visited. They've just walked out after 14 days.
I'd heard that, but have you got that factually? I mean, maybe we need to ask that question. Yeah.
A number of the residents, and I've spoken to 6, not one of them have been spoken to or examined medically by anybody from government or public health.
What, in the whole time that they've been there? In
Correct.
That 14 days? No one's checked?
Correct.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, and I'd heard the same thing, but, so if someone had the sniffles, obviously maybe something would happen, but otherwise you just walk out.
Well, the problem is, Paul, let's put it this way. If you've been in a... I don't want to get into the rights and wrongs of the Comus Hotel, right? But if you've been locked in a room for basically 23 hours a day, and you can argue about locked, the door's closed and there's an alarm on it, as far as I'm concerned, you're locked in. If you've been locked in a room for 12 days and you suddenly have yourself the sniffles, right? Are you going to ring somebody up and say, I think I've got the virus? Because you might think, oh, I've got to have another 14 days in it. You're not going to say anything. But if you were at home and you didn't feel well, the first thing you do is pick the phone up and tell somebody.
So, as I said at the beginning, there's now talk about self-isolation, whatever, coming in. How's that going to affect you? I mean, you're going to sit it out in France or in Ireland until you know what's going to happen. I mean, you don't want to go to a hotel, do you?
As soon as I know, sorry, Paul. As soon as I know I can come home, I'm going to apply to come home. Look, I've got no problem with there being a controlled entry into the island. I've got no problem with having to be self-isolated. I've got no problem with the police knocking on my door or somebody ringing me up or whatever to make sure I am what I am. All I'm saying is we all should be treated the same, and we're not. We are not allowed to self-isolate. People with the virus are allowed to self-isolate, and then we've now had the latest thing about all these key workers coming to the island, and whether you believe there's 100 or 200 or 400, however many they are, they're not obliged to self-isolate. And can I just give you one small example, Paul? In the Comus Hotel at the moment is a young couple with a 6-month-old baby. They've got to self-isolate because he's a returning resident. But if he was a key worker, just coming to, say, join the police force or the fire service or a nurse or something like that, he could just go home and self-isolate in his own house. Now, that's my major issue. Why are people like us treated differently, and why can't we be trusted to stay in our homes?
Yes, there's been rumours about human rights and all this sort of thing. Some lawyers getting involved. I don't know if that's coming to anything or not.
Well, I mean, the human rights side of it, I know the trouble is, Paul, as soon as you say human rights, they all, don't they? All heckles come up on the back of the neck. And blah, blah, blah. The point is, and it's a fair comment, the problem with this legislation is yes, all the regulations went through Tynwald and was debated by all the MHKs, yeah. But then when the conditions of the exemption are brought out, which are actually done either by Coleman or top civil servants, that's not subject to scrutiny. That's not subject to Tynwald scrutiny. So, for example, this thing about what's going on at the Comus Hotel or being required, the things you've got to do, you can't have this, you can't have that, bags are getting searched and all that sort of thing. Members of Tynwald have got no say in that. So where's the Tynwald scrutiny on the idea? And again, please, I'm not having a go at politicians. They've got a very, very, very difficult job. My main argument are the advice that's been given to them by the clinicians. That's my main argument.
Okay, and also, every time we interview anyone that's coming back, we get lots of comments below. The keyboard warriors who are going, "Well, this is all you're doing. You should have come back that time ago. You shouldn't be complaining about anything." Yeah.
Okay. Would you like me to respond to that?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Right. As my personal point of view is, I'm lucky. I can afford because I'm healthy, apart from arthritis, which is why I go down to Portugal for the winter. I went down in October with my motorhome, my wife, and my 2 dogs. The virus before then, nobody even heard of COVID virus. Right? It kicks off good style February, and we made the decision on the 13th of March. Right? We should set off for home, which we did, heading towards the Isle of Man. We got into Spain the next day, and the news came out that Spain was going to close the borders. So there we were going to be in the middle of Spain, stuck in a camper van. Can you imagine it? So we went and we came back to Portugal, and we've waited it out in Portugal. Right. People had 48 hours notice of getting back to the Isle of Man, and we're not all holidaymakers, Paul. If you listen to the people who were stranded around the world, they've gone for visit family, visit relatives, grandchildren. There's 2 cases that I know of that they had to go away to bury their relatives. So, and can't get back. So this is not all about, you shouldn't have gone on holiday, you should have known different. And also, I hear the thing that says you should be grateful that government are bringing you back. No, government aren't bringing me back. Government have stopped me from coming back, right? The reason I'm not coming back is, and I'll be quite clearly, why should I come back, pay nearly £1,000 each for the privilege of sitting in, and this is the point, a 4-star hotel, right? Fine, the Comus might be a 4-star hotel, but a star rating is given on the facilities of the hotel to its residents, right? A 4-star hotel is not a nice bedroom that you have to stay in for 23 hours a day with an alarm on the door. You can't go for a drink. You can't walk for a walk round. You can't go to the gym, okay? You can't have stuff delivered to you. You can't have food delivered. You get your bags searched by the staff in the hotel before it goes in, okay? And the food is served on, and I've got lots of evidence the food is served on plastic plates with a plastic knife and fork and left outside your room. Now, in a 4-star hotel, if I didn't like the quality of the food, or I didn't like the bedroom, what would I do? I'd walk out. I can't walk out of this place. If I walk out, I end up in Derby.
Yes, and that wouldn't be the place for an ex-policeman, would it?
Yeah, and some people might say if I went to Derby, it wouldn't cost me £875 per person to go there.
I think it's up to £1,000 per couple, by the way. I think it was 800 something for one person.
No, it's £1,000. It's £1,000 each.
Oh, okay, well.
And in fairness, it's £875 per person. The only thing is, in fairness, that includes your fare, but plus it's discriminatory, Paul. And let me just say why it's discriminatory. Some people have to pay, some don't. Up to Wednesday, if you weren't in the UK, you couldn't apply. But thirdly, and most importantly, if you've got a medical issue or a dietary issue, you can't stay there. People who have got anxiety issues, they can't be locked in a room for 23 hours a day. And if you've got a dietary issue, the hotel will not cater for it. Also, if you've got a nut allergy or you're a celiac, and would you trust somebody you don't know, you can't see, to supply your food for you?
Geoff, you made some great points there, but as you say, you're off to Ireland anyway, and you're going to sit there and wait for instructions now, are you?
Yes, as soon as we hear next week what the Chief Minister's new council is, and listen, we're all delighted that he's listened, and things have moved on. Well, I'm very pleased about that. As soon as I know what procedure I've got to follow, and finally, Paul, on this point, none of us expect to be allowed to come back in. As far as I know, I'm not speaking for everybody, but all we want to do, Paul, is to go home and self-isolate, just like everybody else is trusted to do. But I'm very emotionally upset about this, because what my government is saying to me, or what the clinicians are saying to my government, is I cannot be trusted to go to my home and stay in my house. Whereas The 200 people who've got the virus, they are trusted. All the key workers who come to the Isle of Man, they are trusted. But just because I'm a returning resident, in this awful thing that people do, I'm not trusted. And that is very hurtful. It's very upsetting. And, it's not right. Plus, it's also expensive, because some people have got to sit in a hotel in Manchester or Liverpool waiting to get their lucky lottery ticket and then pay £875 to stay in the hotel. All right, I'm fortunate. I can afford it, but lots of people can't. And I know the government say, oh, yeah, but we'll, if you're on benefits. But a lot of people aren't on benefits, but they're not. They have to borrow money and they have to pay the government back. So it's incurring a debt. It's not fair, Paul.